Welcome to For F1's Sake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula 1 fans chatting absolute nonsense, offering our ridiculously biased opinions. So, Brad,
We're back again.
we are back again. Look who's back. Lots to digest this week. We've had the final Bahrain test session, and there's quite a bit to talk about. Teams where they should be, teams where they shouldn't be. Quite different to Barcelona. I think we both watched the majority of it.
Yeah, I probably watched about 2 hours of the Barcelona one. I probably watched about 16 hours of the last 3 days worth of Formula One.
Yeah, well, that was it. I think they were. I mean, who was it? I think it was Crofty was saying, for anybody that has watched us for every second of this testing, which predominantly was pretty much us two, take a bow.
Yeah, you can probably see the stats. It's just us sitting there.
Yeah, literally had it on in work. Don't think I did much work for the last 3 days.
Yeah, but sometimes it's not interesting, and you don't want to watch the whole thing. But this time was actually it was pretty interesting the whole way through. There was always something different happening. So,
well, yeah, that's it. I mean, the useful thing is because of the fact that they've shortened it. Teams are pretty desperate to get out there for as much running as they possibly can. Because if you used to have, was it 2 weeks of 4-day tests? You used to have 8 days worth of testing. And I think even that was cut down for what it used to be. And then they used to have private tests as well. So it's so cut down from what it used to be.
They still had slight private tests, didn't they? Like when they released the car, they had a day or something.
Yeah, I think they're allocated 100 kilometers on filming days, but I don't think there's much that you can learn.
I like the new format. Doing the 3 days worth of just racing and whatever you can do with the cars is pretty good. I mean, we've seen a lot of changes, so
we have. Yeah, I mean, speaking of changes, I think the first point of discussion would be Mercedes. Obviously in Barcelona they had a fairly conventional car design, nothing too outlandish. It seemed fairly complex. Experts were saying that it looks pretty decent. However, they rocked up to Bahrain with half the car missing.
Completely different car, yeah. I mean, it's not even a B spec; it's just a completely different car. I don't know where they got this idea for the gigantic side pod, but I mean, it looks all right, but it's just wild.
It's weird, yeah. I mean, for anybody that's not seen this, if you've not had the time of day to kind of watch testing or only kind of watch the races week by week. I mean, Mercedes at Barcelona, you'd agree with me, Brad. It looked fairly conventional side pod wise, just as a normal Formula One car would look.
Pretty
However,
standard.
in Bahrain, they've essentially cut the side pods off either side of the car, so it's essentially a rolling triangle. I think that's the closest way I can describe
triangle. Yeah, it looks crazy, but it hasn't worked either, has it? So
well, this is the thing. It's a little bit worrying for Mercedes. I mean, we've seen Mercedes sandbagging in the past. However, this seems a bit different. Comments from Lewis Hamilton this week. He's saying that they don't believe that they can fight for podiums with the way the car currently is. And judging by the times, I mean, I know times in testing aren't particularly indicative of how fast the car is, but they're well off the pace.
Enough, though, isn't it? They're really far off the pace. No, I mean, they did do a few flying laps where you look at it. I mean, they must have the biggest headaches right now because they're just bumping up and down. There's no control in this car at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, Hamilton had some extreme porpoising on the first day. Porpoising was something that we saw in Barcelona. It was quite extreme with quite a lot of teams, but most of them seem to have got a handle on that now. But Mercedes seemed to be suffering from it quite badly, at least in the first day. I didn't notice it particularly in the second and third. However, the car just doesn't seem to be stable. I mean, Pierre Gasly was saying when he was following Hamilton on day 3 for quite a bit, he was saying, he could tell from his seat that the Mercedes wasn't hooking up. It looked unstable.
Yeah, well, you can tell. I mean, there was double front locks on nearly every lap that Lewis was putting in. I don't know if it coming into turn 10, I think he was struggling really a lot there.
Yeah, well, a lot of cars were struggling to turn 10, I think, with the downhill nature of it and the fact that the suspension has to be so firm for this new regulations in order for the floor to work. It's catching a lot of teams out.
That's what they were talking about, wasn't it? They kept saying that this is the most you're going to see Lewis off the track ever. It's just constantly on the day track.
Well, when you see Lewis Hamilton, off the track, there's an issue with the car because it just doesn't happen very often
Yeah,
at
I
all.
think he actually had a worse time than George did. George seemed okay, but he's not. I think Lewis just had a horrible time.
Yeah, yeah, they just didn't seem to be able to dial the car in.
It's quite
So
sad for me.
everybody thought when this Mercedes rocked up to testing, everyone went initially. All of our first thoughts was shit.
Yeah, I think
This is going to
everyone
be
looks at it and goes,
fast.
"Oh, for fuck's sake, not
Yeah,
again!"
yeah, because
This
it's
is like 7 years on the bounce where they've come with something completely different, and it's always worked. But this
yeah, but
time it hasn't.
it's such an innovation, like the DAS system was a couple of years
Yeah,
back. You know, it was a case that it was so innovative and outside of the box thinking, and this seemed to be the same thing. We thought, oh Christ, you know, have we missed a step here?
yeah,
But interestingly, Toto came out and said, you know, if it was a case that we were so much quicker from a side pod differentiation, we'd have won the championship on page 20 of the 150-page rules. You know, it's unlikely that would have created such a big performance gap. But I mean, obviously we've seen it hasn't. It I don't know whether
it just
it's the
looks
side
different.
pod design,
I
but
think it's purely just the look really caught people out. Obviously, Inspector Seb comes out and he's looking around and he has no idea what's going on with it. But
yeah.
it's not worked, and that was shown the whole way through testing in Bahrain so far.
From my perspective, you know, it would have been nice to see Mercedes doing well just for the sake of George Russell, really.
That's true, yeah.
You know, he's finally got this shot at
Can you
potentially
imagine if
challenging
this
for a
is a
world
back running
championship.
team and George has just joined it? Oh,
I know, I
how
know. Well,
torrid would that
I
be?
mean, the saving grace is that Williams were. Well, I say saving grace. I mean, it's bittersweet, I suppose, for George is the fact that Williams are at the back of the grid, and so he knows at least he's made some progression there. But they both come out and said that the car needs a lot of work. So hopefully Mercedes can get on top of that for George Russell's sake.
Yeah, this one's for George, but not
Yeah,
for Lewis. Lewis can struggle as much as he wants,
yeah, yeah. From my
as much as
perspective,
we
yeah,
want. Probably as much as you want, not what I want.
yeah.
I
You
want
want him
Hamilton to have a
to win
great year.
again.
I think so. I want him to break the record, and that'll be it. Once he's done with the eighth, I think he can go.
Do you think he will?
Yeah,
You do. So as soon as he's got that 8 out, you think he's off.
I think so. Yeah, I didn't think he would come back this year. Actually,
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't doubt him coming back this year just for the sake of the new regulations. I think it's just a point of intrigue, isn't it, with the fact that they're so different conceptually from previous years. I think it's interesting for the drivers to want to kind of get to grips with these. And I think you've seen by what we'll talk later on by the signing of Kevin Magnussen. You know, he's beaming from ear to ear, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
yeah.
Moving on anyway. So the next team I wanted to talk about was Red Bull. Day 1 and 2, the car looked identical to how it looks in Barcelona, and I think everybody came out a little bit disappointed.
Yeah,
Aerodynamicist
a little
God Adrian Newey hadn't
Your
brought any
boyfriend.
updates with
He
him.
looks happy though. He had a good weekend. Even yesterday, he looked really happy.
Well, this is it. I mean, on day 3, all of a sudden, Red Bull brings out a huge update. Well, they say a huge update. Everybody's been saying it's a huge update, but from my perspective, it seemed relatively small. It just seemed like a slight indentation, crease in the side pods, a little bit of a floor change, and the front barge board type area. But it seems to have made a world of difference. I mean, Verstappen, the current world champion, ended the test at top of the timing sheets with a 1:31.7. You know,
Which is a pretty good lap, and it's on C5s. I mean that's the fastest tire now, isn't it?
yeah,
But
C5 is the softest tire, so it's a
yeah,
full qualifying tire.
but still, that's a really quite a good time. I don't know what the track record is or what we saw last year, but I'm pretty certain that is a good time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's about 2.5 seconds off pole from last year, and
Mm.
2.5 seconds off because his pole that was similar to the Bahrain testing time that he got last year. So it's about 2.5 seconds off the pace, if that is an all-out push lap. But I'd be very surprised if it was.
No, it won't be not yet.
Because
We'll see it next
I
week.
think last year, obviously, it was because the fact we're at the end of the regulations, the cars were converging anyway, and so it wasn't really a case that anybody had to sandbag. They pretty much knew where they were. But this year, you know, they're trying to keep their cards close to their chest. Even so, I mean, he did go top, so I don't know how close they're keeping their cards, unless they're just so confident in that car that they believe that it's just going to be unstoppable, which might be the case.
I hope not.
remains to be seen. I hope not, to be honest. Now,
I mean,
I mean,
we had Schumacher as second on this, right? So really, we have no idea what's going on.
yeah, well, yeah, Christ. I mean, if Haas are second in the timing sheets with a 1:32.2, how far off were they? That's half a
That's
second
probably their
off.
fastest possible lap, though.
Well, this
I
is
have a
it.
feeling.
This is it. It could be that Haas was on really low fuel, but he wasn't on the softest tyre. So you think if it was an all-out push lap, um, that's not bad
Yeah,
for a C4
not bad
tyre.
at all. Not bad.
Um, so we can't really gauge exactly where the teams are from these times and what testing is. But what we can say for certain is that Ferrari look absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah, they do. They've had the most solid testing through Barcelona and Bahrain. Hardly any issues. Both the drivers have loved the car. It just looks great. There's not much to say about Ferrari. They just look like they're having a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, their run plans seem to have gone well. They've got the laps in. The car looks solid. It looks quick. They're not seemingly going out of their way to set these blistering lap times, but the drivers seem complacent with the car. All the teams seem to be suggesting that Ferrari are going to be the ones to beat. So it could be a Ferrari Red Bull Championship fight this year.
It's about time.
I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to see somebody in the mix other than Mercedes. Um, it's only a good thing for the sport having multiple cars being able to compete for the world championship. I think that's what everybody wants to see, no matter who you support. Having as many different winners of the season throughout the season is the best thing, really, isn't it?
That's what we've wanted for years.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, I've waited for it. I mean, we've seen Mercedes at the top for so long. I mean, I'm not I kind of do hope that they aren't at the top now, but I think we're going to see something really special from Ferrari, especially for first time in 3 years now. We've not really seen Ferrari competitive at all.
Yeah, God, what was their last podium or last? Was it last podium or last
They
win
had
was
one last year.
2019? Yeah, they had a last win was 2019, I think.
2019, right? And what, the Leclerc at Monza?
Yeah, could have been actually. Christ, that's a long time ago.
How long ago was that?
I
I
think
felt that was 2018 or something.
No, it's 3 years ago because it's 2022 now. I mean, the years have gone by so quickly with COVID.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain it was 2019. But I mean, that's disastrous for Ferrari. But I mean, they've got this opportunity now with these new regulations to get on top of this. And, if they start well, which they seem to have done, we could be in for another period of Ferrari domination. They could do a Mercedes over the next 8 years. Who knows?
Let's not get too excited.
but they've made big steps with their power unit as well. I think this is where a lot of the performance is coming from. Reports seem to suggest that they'd spent quite a lot of their allocated time last year developing the engine because of the fact that the engine is going to be frozen from October this year.
Right.
They look pretty good.
Yeah, they're good testing. I mean, we can't even really speak too much about Ferrari because nothing's changed with that car. They've just kept the same thing and it's worked so well.
Yeah, interesting that they haven't applied too many upgrades.
They don't need to.
Which makes me think that maybe they are sandbagging. Maybe that time we've done on the C4, the 132.4 is fairly high on fuel. We'll find out in not too long.
Didn't even have much aeroplaning going on, did they? They weren't testing too much. It was just it was just the car going out and that was it.
Yeah, so the thing that Ferrari have got above everybody else is reliability. That car just seems, like I said, absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah, bulletproof. Yeah.
Moving on to a car that wasn't bulletproof, which
took me by surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely gutted. Was the McLaren. They have had an absolutely horrendous testing week. Started off by the fact that Daniel Ricciardo tested positive for COVID this weekend. And so he's not been able to do any running in the car. So it's all been down to Norris. And then they've been plagued with front brake issues, which have pretty much stopped their running, have ground it to a halt for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Just such a shame because they were on such a high from Barcelona. They looked like the team that had, surprisingly done really well along with Ferrari. Thought, could McLaren and Ferrari be at the top? I mean, this would be amazing, having third and fourth fighting for first and second.
I really thought we would see that as well. I had a feeling that McLaren just had it all sorted.
Yeah, I did. It's F1 is a cruel mistress. Um,
It's not gone well for them. I mean, Norris didn't have many laps, so it's a 200 overall, probably the
yeah,
least of
it was
anyone. I
it
mean,
was
it's
the
not
least of
enough.
any
It
team.
was the least, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it's a sad week for McLaren. No
It,
Ricciardo, but we did see Oscar get a potential seat for now.
well, yeah. So some of the news that's come out is the fact that if Ricardo isn't fit to drive for the Bahrain Grand Prix next weekend, Oscar Piastri has agreed with McLaren that they can use him for that race. Which I don't wish illness on anybody, but I think it'd be fantastic to see Piastri get a shot at Formula One in a really good car because you know with the difficulties that they've had in this test, people still believe, or the teams are still fairly confident in the fact that McLaren, once those issues are sorted, is quite a quick car. I just hope that they can score some regular podiums this season and a couple of wins. I think they deserve that after the difficulty that they had with the Honda power unit a few years back that
Yeah,
sent them essentially straight to the back of the grid. They've been on a really, really good upward trajectory recently, and I think that I don't know. I just like the way that the team operates. They're fairly chilled out. Zach Brown seems to be a really good
and
team
he's one of the
boss.
best, I think.
Yeah, they're not too serious. You get the impression with Ferrari and Red Bull that it's a very serious operation, which it does work. But I think for the longevity of the team, the drivers, and operating with a really good atmosphere, nobody does it like McLaren. It's the place where you'd want to be. If you're having
Oh,
fun.
100%. If I had to work for one of the teams, I would definitely be going to McLaren. Just
Yeah,
looks like it's a fun environment. They're having a good time, trying to make their car like the best they can.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
like you said, Zach Brown's actually he's quality, and you get to see that a lot in any kind of recordings of him. You see that he's just a nice guy and he's having fun.
Yeah. One
Um,
thing that I wanted to talk about, funnily enough, with
mm,
McLaren, last year, obviously, or not last year, the year before, with Norris and Sainz, they had a really good partnership, didn't they? They obviously gelled instantly.
yeah,
And when Ricardo came in, that they would just get on like a house on fire because they're so similar in personality wise.
yeah,
But you
wasn't
won't
the
have
case.
seen this yet, Brad. But in Drive to Survive. Um, it's quite shocking how much they
Is it?
don't like
Is it
each
quite
other.
hostile?
Very hostile, yeah.
Really?
But it seems to be coming predominantly from Norris.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, really, really interesting. It's bizarre.
No way. I'm gonna have to get that on there, Elon. But that's crazy.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see because Norris is normally fairly laid back, fairly jovial, but yeah, behind the scenes there was quite a bit of tension there.
No way.
Really, really, really interesting. And
Is
so
it Norris being ultra focused last year? Is that what it was? I mean, we didn't see quite the same sort of stuff you'd expect from Lando, but
I feel like he felt a little bit under threat from the fact that there's a proven race winner there with Ricardo, and so he felt like he had to prove himself. And I think initially we saw Ricardo out qualify him in the Bahrain Grand Prix last year. However, Lando managed to beat him in the race, and I think it was just a tit for tat throughout the season. But there's something about their personalities. I don't know whether it's because they're too similar that they find that they're clashing. I think when people can be too similar, it's a case
yeah,
that
maybe.
they don't gel. But yeah,
But
very,
Ricardo
very
gets on with
interesting.
everyone, hasn't he? He's always had good partnerships. I mean, him and Max was probably one of the best partnerships we've seen.
Yeah, yeah, this is it.
Um,
It's very strange, but it's quite clear they don't like each other. So yeah,
more to see on that this year, then.
yeah, definitely have a watch of that Drive to Survive when you can because
Yeah,
it's really
definitely.
interesting.
I need to watch that.
So going back to McLaren's testing, they've had these issues with front brakes. They couldn't seem to get on top of it. It doesn't seem like it's a quick fix, and so I believe that they're shipping over or flying over parts to hopefully have it rectified, I should say, for the Grand Prix next weekend. Andreas Seidel came out and said, he thinks that they should be able to get on top of it, but obviously they've lost a lot of testing time with that issue, which is unfortunate. Um,
Well, they're going straight into a race with a car they haven't tested.
But yeah, well, I mean, a car that Ricardo hasn't driven all week. He's not driven it since Barcelona. I don't think. Did he come out for half the day on day one? I
Um,
can't remember.
I think he did for a little bit, didn't he? I'm sure we
Um,
must have seen him for a little bit.
but then I don't know. I think he may have
Actually,
missed
no, because his,
missed the
his
whole
name would have
session.
been on that timesheet that we've got here. It's not on it at all.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, so
even
he's
if it
he's
was a
missed.
terrible lap,
Yeah,
he's missed the whole thing.
yeah. So I mean, that's
It's
gonna
not
be a
good at
huge
all.
blow to Ricardo because he was saying that in Barcelona, he was pretty confident in the way that the car handled because obviously last year he just didn't gel with the car. It didn't seem to suit his driving style. But he came out in Barcelona and said that he believes that this car,
It's
really
perfect,
does.
yeah.
It matches his driving style. So hopefully, um,
But
you
that's
know,
why I thought this was going to be a great team because they both said they loved the car, and then they get to Bahrain and suddenly it's just loads of issues. Like, what happened?
yeah.
Did it take a knock on the plane? Like, what the hell's happened in this car? The brake issues make no sense because the track's very similar to Barcelona, in my opinion. There's a few of those tight corners that you have to do, and yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah, I think it might have been due to an upgrade on the brake cooling duct that
Right?
they've
Okay,
got. I
that
think
makes sense.
it's causing an issue. But I mean, you'd think if it was fairly straightforward, they'd have managed to get on top of it. There must be some underlying issue there that they're struggling with.
They'll probably release something this week. We'll probably find out.
Yeah, hopefully, and apparently they've also got upgrades coming before the first race,
Right? Okay,
and
that's
so
why I asked them.
hopefully,
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully we'll see some resurgence from McLaren. But like I said, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully Ricardo's okay, but also hopefully we do get to see a bit of Oscar Piastri. Hopefully it's the case that Ricardo's still got COVID, but he's absolutely fine. Oscar Piastri comes in and gets to use his seat for a week.
Yeah, he's absolutely fine, but Piastri takes over for the year.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
just
great.
I just want to see Piastri in an F1 car in
So
a
do I.
race. I just want
I
to see
think he
what he's
deserves
like.
it. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah, he
Get rid of
100% deserves it.
Guanjo and
When you show, yeah.
put in Piastri. That's where he should have been.
He should, yeah, he should absolutely. I mean, I'd be surprised if Alpine aren't competitive this season. I can't see Fernando staying there much longer, and so he's
No,
potentially got that seat, or he'll
he's
be
getting
eyeing it
old,
up at
man.
least. Yeah,
He should just chill out, do something else. Maybe I could see him doing a bit of punditry. I mean,
yeah.
maybe.
Well, I imagine Sky will get him on, won't they? Give him some insight. But I mean, he's a reserve driver, so if it's the case that anybody picks up COVID in the Alpine team, or if anybody on the grid, to be fair, picks up COVID, they'll want Oscar Piastri as a reserve driver, won't they?
Yeah, definitely.
It's just whether they will accept it, because he could be bringing information over to Alpine. Who knows? But that remains to be
It
seen.
won't be like that.
So moving on then, another really big talking point was Haas and Nikita Mazepin. Obviously, we mentioned last week that they parted ways. It wasn't a very amicable split. They don't know whether you saw what what Mazepin came out and said shortly after the sacking. In terms
Yeah, I
of,
mean, I've got the thing. I've got a video of him doing like he's setting up his own company or something to help like
I mean, that
people
is,
sort out their lives.
oh God, it's just,
Someone's just tagged the goat as spoken. Like
oh, I couldn't believe that.
it's not good, is
It's
it?
just a foundation set up to allow other billionaires that have been impacted by the Russian
Yeah.
crisis to allow them to continue driving and having fun. I mean, oh, come on. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever
It's
heard.
funny because he looks so angry in the video. He's got a baby face, but he just looks so angry.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does not present well on Drive to Survive at all.
Of course
He
he
is
doesn't.
he is absolutely horrid.
He has no idea what he's doing. Doesn't know where the buttons are on that car. I remember that.
He just doesn't know what he's doing, and he refuses to blame himself, which I think is his biggest downfall. So I don't know if anybody that's listening has watched Drive to Survive, but I mean, you really do not get a good impression from Mazepin after watching
No.
that. I mean, it's pretty much a spoilt child. However, now that he's gone, I mean,
I thought they
we
had a
we talked
great
about
week.
this last week
Yeah.
in terms of who could replace him,
We didn't even
and
think of him.
nobody even mentioned Kevin Magnussen. I
I don't
don't
know how we
even.
forgot about him. Like, he's actually such a good driver.
We just expected the fact that they'd sacked him a couple of years ago because of the fact that he wasn't good enough. However, clearly that wasn't the case. It must have been a case that they needed the funding, and so that's why they brought in the Mazepins. But yeah, Kevin Magnussen is back in Formula One. Something
Okay,
that Brad is
Magnum.
extremely happy about.
I'm so happy about it. I love Magnussen. He's I'm not going to say he's reckless, but he kind of is at the same time. He throws everything into all the cars that he's been in.
Yeah,
So we
it,
saw it straight away.
I mean, he had a few run-ins, didn't he, with Grosjean whilst at
Yeah, yeah.
Haas. But I mean, Kevin Magnussen's been right up there. He was driving for McLaren at a point. He's got he's got some underlying talent. Obviously, he's getting on a little bit now. But like I was saying before, he didn't realize. He came out and said he didn't realize how much he'd missed Formula One. He noted that he was beaming from ear to ear, grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah, he was so happy, wasn't he? It's good
Yeah,
to see, actually. But I think Haas have actually managed the situation so well. Obviously, it's been so difficult for them to take her for their biggest sponsor, get rid of a driver, and then bring someone in. But they've done so well with it, and they've had a good testing as well.
yeah. Well, I love the fact that they they didn't even tell Mazepin. They just announced it to the media, and so he found out at the exact same time that we all found out. Which I thought was brilliant.
Well, yeah, Magnussen said he wasn't sure if it was actually true.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was brilliant, and the fact that he comes out and says, I felt like I deserved more. Well, I mean, watching Drive to Survive, I thought he didn't deserve anything. He was horrible.
Shouldn't
So
have been on there for it, even for the Barcelona
he
testing.
shouldn't.
That's lucky enough.
He didn't deserve to be in Formula One at all. He just didn't need to be there. And so the world
I
has
hope he's
corrected
listening.
itself. I'm sure he is.
Must be.
So yeah. So I mean, Haas had a fairly good week. After having a terrible time last testing in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, Schumacher second on the timing sheets, who obviously, like we mentioned, doesn't really mean much, but
They
it's
topped it for a while as well, didn't they?
yeah, they did. Yeah, I think Magnussen topped it on at the end of the second day because I think Haas had issues getting their freight over through no fault of their own, and so the FIA allowed them a couple of extra hours at the end of each testing session to kind of make up that time, and so we saw. But I think it was Magnussen on the second day took the timing sheets out of ours. But yeah, I mean, it's a departure from what we've seen from Haas for the last couple of years. I mean, even the fact that we don't, these times aren't particularly representative, it's still nonetheless they're not at the back of it. I mean, somebody has to be at the back of the timing sheets, and it's not Haas for once. It's not even as if they're in the middle of it. They're right near the top. They beat Ferrari
But
in terms of
look
this
who it
test.
is. Look who it is at the bottom.
Look who it is. I know, Paul Williams. It's just.
It's not Paul Latifi. I hate the guy. It's where he belongs.
Nothing wrong with Latifi. I like Latifi, but Albon even so.
Shame for Albon.
Yeah, I mean Williams had brake fire. If you didn't see it, quite
Yeah.
a dramatic brake fire.
There was.
That was it Albon driving or was it Latifi?
Yeah, I think it was Latifi.
Was it?
That had the brake fire.
I'm
pretty
yeah,
sure it was.
he jumped out, and as they started to kind of put the fire out, the back of the car just exploded.
Yeah.
Quite dramatic.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. So Williams lost out on quite a bit of testing. Funnily enough, still seemed to get more laps in the McLaren, but they've not had a particularly good car this week. From what's being said around, their car just doesn't seem to look quite quick enough.
Doesn't look finished, does it? But it's the same as most teams, I think. There's a lot of teams that aren't having their full car going out here. There's just a little bit too much testing going on, and it's not worked out again. And it's a slow car.
Yeah, it's such a shame, I think, for Williams because I mean they've been fairly similar to Haas in terms of results, and it started to pick up a little bit last year, but yeah, it's just not been a good week for them, and hopefully it doesn't continue through the year. But Alpine seem to have
next week, aren't we?
Yeah, Alpine seem to have a resurgence because we were saying last week that the week before from testing that they were in dire straits. Alpine, they were pretty much as bad as Haas, but they seem to have turned that round this week and had a resurgence and look fairly quick actually. Unfortunately, I just don't like that team. I don't know why.
You just don't like Alpine?
No, I don't. I just don't like.
Nor do
them.
I. My complaint is more the fact that they don't have any good like casual cars to go out and drive on a weekend or something. Like it's not. There's
completely
no
unrelated
car.
to F1.
That car looks so stupid. The one that was on the hot laps,
the A110,
was awful.
I mean,
what even is that? How's that a car brand?
Anyway, we're moving away from F1 here, but
Yeah.
completely unrelated. Yeah. So I mean, the fact that Alpine have kind of moved. I mean, Christ, Alpine looking at the timesheets were quicker than Mercedes.
I
Again,
know,
I have to
shocking, isn't it?
stress that it doesn't really mean anything, but still, it's.
They might do.
I mean, yeah. I mean that. I mean that could really be indicative of how poor the Mercedes has been. The thing is,
134s.
whether a team is sandbagging or not, they don't definitively know how quick the car is unless they set the time. If you look at Haas's time being 2/10 quicker than Ferrari, they know at this point definitively that their car at the moment is quicker than Ferrari. Obviously, that's not going to be the case, but Ferrari don't know that. They don't know that
We
yet. I
don't
mean,
know that. Nobody knows.
nobody knows that, but they can assume that from how much fuel they put into the car and how much deficit that's likely to create. But even so, um,
We kind of expected that Haas would be quite good this year, though, because they kind of just wrote off last year
they had to be. They
for
had to be,
testing,
didn't
didn't
they?
they? So
Yeah, they couldn't afford to not show up this year. I mean, if Haas don't score points
yeah,
this
this is the
year,
last
then
one.
this will be the last year that we see Haas. But I would be very surprised if that's the case. I expect Haas to kind of assume the role of last year's Aston Martin. That type of performance, I reckon. I
I
don't know
hope
about
they're
you.
incredible. Actually, I really hope that they're good. To be fair, I like the look of the car as well, but I want Schumacher to be at the top. I think that name belongs at the top.
Well, that's another interesting point. Is we finally get an idea of how good Schumacher is against Kevin Magnussen. I mean, Kevin Magnussen's not going to set the world on fire. He's not the world's fastest driver, but
No,
if Schumacher does get beaten by him, then that clearly states Schumacher maybe isn't as quick as we hoped he would be.
yeah. Well, Magnussen said that himself, didn't he? Said he's only seen Schumacher for a little bit, but he said you can just tell that racing's in his blood. Like it's just a huge part of him.
Yeah,
So yeah, we'll see the best out of him this year, hopefully.
yeah. It's a shame that we don't get to see Michael at the track,
Yeah, it is.
kind of supporting him. Really, I mean, that's one thing I know every F1 fan or every fan around the world would like to see. We just don't seem to get any updates on him. I think it's
No, it's been done for years now, isn't it? We haven't heard anything.
yeah, but that would be amazing to one day. If Schumacher does get to a world title, get to see Michael kind of come out and see his son win that. But he's not going to do that
I
at
don't know what
Haas.
position he's in. No, probably not.
Um,
Maybe.
I mean that begs the question. When is he likely to get a drive in a top team? Because it looks like with Ferrari being so stable at the minute, Sainz is like he says a smooth operator. Um, he's unlikely to. They're unlikely to relinquish that seat with Sainz, and obviously Leclerc's the gifted child, and again they don't want to kind of give that seat up. I
Red
can't
Bull's
see.
not going to give up Max's seat. Obviously, he's signed on for years. I think that he's not good enough to be a second driver at the moment for Red Bull.
No, I
I don't
mean
know. I just can't see him getting a seat in any of the championship teams.
no, unless I mean the only outside opportunity I could think of is when Hamilton retires. Schumacher would be very on brand for Mercedes. I mean, very on brand. I'm surprised he's not in the Mercedes Academy. Well, I'm not surprised. Obviously, he's going to be in the
Who's
Ferrari
Mercedes'
Academy.
backup driver now?
Um, is it Nick De Vries?
I don't know. I don't even know who that is, to be honest.
Yeah, Nick De Vries won the Formula 2 championship. Not last year, the year before, but he's racing in Formula E now. He won the Formula E championship last year for Mercedes.
Right, and now he's come back to Mercedes as a test driver.
I don't know. I think he might still be competing in Formula E, but then he's also assuming the test driver role. I might be wrong in that. It might be Stoffel Van Dorn, but again, he's also racing in Formula E. So
No
I
idea then.
don't know actually. So it's a possibility. I mean, Schumacher would fit in at Mercedes really well, I think, brand wise. German driver, a German team. But he's going to have to put in some stellar performances. He needs to outperform that Haas in the same way that George Russell was outperforming the Williams, but he needs to do that year on year. We need to see flashes of absolute brilliance from him in order for him to kind of warrant that seat.
I just can't wait for next week now because we have no idea what we're going to see next week.
I know.
There could be fires. There could be everything.
Yeah. Well, this is
That's a red flag. Has to
yeah. Well, this is one thing I wanted to talk to you about because the nature of these cars. I mean, Martin Brundle was kind of stressing this over testing. You'll have heard. Because of the ground effect, the way that the cars need to be set up is that the suspension is extremely firm. to stop the car from sinking too low to the ground in order to stop the ground effect from stalling. And so what this is then, what has happened from this, a direct result from that, is the fact that in slow corners and uneven corners, the car can't modulate the suspension as much as it used to be able to. Because I believe last year they had pneumatic valves in the suspension that would allow them to kind of adjust them throughout the lap, which they don't have anymore. It's a lot more rudimentary, and so in the high-speed corners, these cars are actually quicker than last year because the ground effect is so powerful. But in the low speed, they're so dog slow and so unsettled. And so
They look slow as well. That's the thing. You can see it in the testing that they are slow coming round. You know, when I don't know if you saw it when Piastri was standing down there on one of the corners, and he's talking about like the lockups. I
yeah,
think we're going to see the lockups so much.
well, this is it. And so, I mean, they're having to get on the power so late out of the corner because the car is so sensitive to that because the suspension is so firm. But like you said, they're having so many lockups in these low-speed corners. What on earth is going to happen at Monaco? Every corner is a low-speed
Everyone's going to be
corner.
in the wall, aren't they?
Yeah, we could see absolute pandemonium. This could be one of the best Monaco races ever. They could just have cars just flying into the wall at top speed because they just lock up
I
straight
don't
into the
want to. I
wall.
don't think we really want to say that. Probably see someone die if that's the case.
No, I'm sure they can't get up quick enough in Monaco, and these cars are a lot
No.
tougher. But, I mean, it begs the question, in these low speed corners and these tracks, we could be seeing quite a few mistakes, and this could really shake up the
Oh,
order. If you've
100%.
got two teams at the front fighting for the title, and you're gonna be going hammer and tong at each other. These low speed corners are going to provide a real difficulty. We could even see a few drifts.
Yeah, it
Fingers
wouldn't
crossed.
surprise me. I think we need. It's gonna be whoever can adapt to the car the quickest will be the winner this year. I think, and I can see that being Max now. I don't. I've changed my mind on who's going to win this, and I really do think it's going to be Max now.
Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about his driving style changing to kind of suit the car a lot better. It's completely different from last year. Um, I mean, John Lacey was actually in the commentary box. I don't know if you heard on Friday,
Yeah,
and he was saying, he believes that these older drivers are going to get to grips with the cars because of the fact that they've been through so many regulation changes. They're
and
used
then
to having to
the younger
change
ones
their
will
driving
struggle.
style. Yeah, but I mean, Verstappen, if you are a talent like Verstappen, you're likely to be able to
He just gets so
overcome
much
that.
out of every car, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. But I mean, one thing that I thought watching the cars in the testing, which I thought is really good for the fans, is because again that suspension is so firm. Um, the cars are bouncing around the track a lot more, and they look more difficult to drive. Whether they are or not is another question. But from a fan's perspective, you're starting to see the drivers work a lot more, and I think that makes them look faster, even if they're not. You watch the videos of old of Ayrton Senna. Bounce around the car, heads all over the place. And that's just not something we've
Proper racing
seen.
car.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something we've seen for the past few years. But with these new cars, we're starting to get a glimpse into that kind of tongue and hammer style of driving, aren't we?
It's good though. I think it's
Well,
really
yeah,
good news
this is
for
it. I
us.
mean, that's what we want. We don't want drivers to come out of the cars
It's not just
and
driving itself. Yeah, this is more talent
I mean,
needs to
God,
go into
was
this.
it 2018? Hamilton got out of the car and said it's too easy. These cars are too easy to drive. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
mean it's looked like that for years.
yeah, I think it's important for the sport. I mean, we need to make it as difficult as possible for the drivers. I mean, these are supposed to be the 20 best drivers in the world. They should be able to cope with whatever the car throws at them, and we want to see them fighting with the car. And that's something we have seen through that testing with these lockups and these slow corners. They're having to fight with the car. They've got no mechanical grip whatsoever with the way that these cars are currently set up. I mean,
It's just
George,
whether or not we get it in the top team because whoever's going to be top, if they're having struggles as well, it means that we'll give a lot of space for the lower teams to actually come and get more points.
yeah.
So it could just make it more interesting for the championship.
Well, yeah. I mean, they've got these. I mean, again, if you're not aware, whoever's listening, I mean, we've got new regulations in place now. The top teams halfway through the season, if you are the top team of the championship, essentially, it's a sliding scale, and you get less wind tunnel testing time, less CFD items to develop your car for the second half of the season. And obviously, if you're at the bottom, it's vice versa. And so that helps to kind of it's essentially a financial fair play with the cost cap, and then you've got that, which is fairly similar in a sense of the NFL in terms of their drafting system, in order to kind of give the worst performing teams first pick of the best players to help level the field. And so hopefully that will come into effect, whereby if Williams are at the bottom, which they are currently, it gives them the most amount of time to kind of progress the car and catch up to the top of the field.
It's a great way of doing things.
It is. It's a really good concept, actually. It remains to be seen if that system works. But the intentions are good. I hope it does. I mean, like we're saying, the more different championship leaders we've got, or more different race winners we've got throughout the season, the better.
That's what the fans want. That's what I
It
want.
is. It is exactly what the fans want. So I think the cars look faster. They look more difficult to drive. They're more of a spectacle, I think, is the right word. It's going to be a good season. I'm so excited for the season. After watching Duel on Sky and Drive to Survive, I cannot
I need
wait
to get
for
Drive
this
to
new
Survive
season
on
to
today. I
start.
mean, Duel was unbelievable. That was so
Yeah, for
well
anybody
done.
that's not seen it, watch Duel on Sky Sports, because it's absolutely brilliant. It's just essentially the Verstappen Hamilton title fight. And if you're not into F1, obviously you're not going to be listening to us. But if you're not, just watch that and tell me you don't want to kind of watch it next year, because it was so well shot, and you've got all the insight from Damon Hill, Martin Brundle, all the top guys. I thought it was a really, really good program, better than Drive to Survive actually this year. One thing about Drive to Survive, I find, I don't know whether anybody listening feels the same way. It's too commercialized in a sense of, I mean, we were saying before we started the podcast, in terms of even just little things, for F1 purists, dubbing the wrong sound over the top of the car is just a wind up. It
I
really
just don't get
irritates
why
me.
it's even done. Like, it makes no sense, because the cars, they don't sound terrible, but why would you not just keep the pure sound of it? It makes no sense.
Yeah, if a car's going flat out, why would you overlay the sound of a car accelerating? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just weird
Yeah, it's
anyway.
bizarre.
But they, obviously, it's interesting to see what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, the Yuki Tsunoda that episode is brilliant. He's got absolutely no filter.
Oh, really? I'm going to get it on straight
It's
away when we finish
yeah,
this.
he's very much like you, Brad. I think you'd get on with him well.
No filter.
Exactly, that's you.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
But other things in the news this week. A really weird comment from Toto Wolff.
How strange.
Yeah, so Toto came out after the Nikita Mazepin sacking and said, "I'm in two minds for Nikita himself. He's a guy that merits to be in Formula One. He can drive," which seems to be completely the opposite view of everybody else. I mean,
Everyone
on what
complained about him.
planet? On what planet has he said? Has he seen Nikita Mazepin in a state where he thinks he can drive? I mean, it's hilarious watching Drive to Survive, and the fact that Nikita Mazepin comes in on the first race, he spins out and crashes in 3 corners. How is that somebody that deserves to be in Formula One? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean,
I just thought that was a
he's
bizarre
been
comment. I
called
mean,
Mazepin as well. Like, the guy
exactly.
does not drive in a straight line.
I mean, we said this last week, that there was images of him, testing for Mercedes a couple of years back, which we thought was bizarre. I wonder whether it's purely a financial aspect for Toto, trying to get some of the Mazepin money for this, that, and the other, or whether he's got another company that he needs that money for, and so he's kind of saving face PR wise. I don't know.
I don't know. It's a bit of a weird situation. I don't think he should have said it either.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, especially as the way the world is, there's just no need for him to say that. Very bizarre. And then other news as well. We've seen that Imola has signed up to continue racing. I think for the next 3 or 4 years. I think it was.
Yeah.
It's a great track.
It's a mental track, isn't it?
Yeah, AlphaTauri's home track. We saw that horrendous crash with George Russell and Valtteri Bottas last year at Imola. I mean, it's an infamous track, obviously, for reasons with Ayrton Senna. But yeah, it's great to have it back on the calendar. I think it's been a good spectacle. Hopefully, we get to visit it, when it's not horrible weather. I say not horrible weather. It's just when it's grey. If it rains, then it's great because it adds an extra spectacle. But It's been fairly dull every time we've been to Imola the past couple of years. But I like seeing these different tracks entering the grid. I think when you've been watching F1 for a number of years and you've seen the same tracks year in, year out, it can get a bit dull. Obviously, having new cars refreshes that. But bringing in these
It
new
should be new
tracks,
tracks every year. I think there's a lot of tracks that aren't used around the world, and they should be like put into. I think I said to you that Fuji would be a great one to see. I don't know why that's
yeah.
never been looked at because it's a great racing track. Maybe it's not long enough for these cars. I don't know. It's quite a short track, isn't it?
I mean, it's fairly short, but I think that's a good shout. Fuji would be
That
great,
long
but I mean,
straight would be mega to watch the cars going down there.
especially this generation.
Yeah,
It's just whether they can. I mean, it's which race do you substitute for
for that.
Fuji, because you can't get rid of.
Maybe Portimao, Portugal.
Yeah, that's a good point actually.
Portugal's
I
kind
mean,
of a. I don't
I was
like
really
it so much.
excited. I was really excited for Portimao when it came on the calendar. Was it last year or the year
I
before?
think it was 2 years ago.
Because obviously they use that quite a lot for car reviews, don't they,
Yeah,
online? And it's a nice circuit. It's a lovely part of the world, but it just doesn't seem to provide particularly interesting racing. I mean, to be fair, actually, Le Castellet in France is the dullest circuit
yeah. Get
on
rid
the
of
grid.
that.
I hate
That can
that.
go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Get rid of that. Put Fuji in place of that. 100% every day of the
Then
week.
you've got a few of those tracks that are just iconic now. So I think obviously Silverstone, Monaco, they've got to stay.
Monza.
Monza. I think
Our incident where
Brazil.
we ended up at Monza inadvertently.
I completely forgot about that.
So
Whose
being
fault was
Brad,
that?
it's both of our fault. We
Yeah.
just rushed. We went to Milan a few years back, and on the way back, we somehow managed to board the wrong train.
We just followed
Um,
some girl, didn't we? She was rushing as well. So we are like, yeah, she must be going the right way.
yeah, she was rushing with the suitcase. We thought, oh, clearly she's going to the airport. And then it turned out we were on the train for a good, what was it, about an hour. It must have been about
Yeah,
an
it
hour.
was
And
something
then
like that.
we saw the sign like, oh, look, Monza. Ah, cool. We
Yeah.
should come back here.
Then we
And
just
then it
looked at our
dawned
phones
on
and went,
us.
shit.
It just dawned on us that is the complete opposite direction of the airport.
It was a weird old holiday, wasn't it? Because we kept saying that we want to see these places and we just stumble into them like it was nothing. And the same thing happened with Monza. Complete accident. A
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
accident.
So we'll have to go back there on purpose the next time for an F1 race, because I think, but I mean, what a circuit that is, and
Yeah, it's
it'd
a
be
great
so
circuit.
good to be part of the Tifosi for a Ferrari win. I mean,
Mm.
it's highly likely that Ferrari are going to win Monza this year. The car is as good as it looks, and so I mean, Monza is going to be the centre of the world for Ferrari
Yeah.
this year.
I've never been to Monza, so that's definitely one I need to go to. It's a
Yeah,
great track.
100%, 100%. So I mean, has any of your thoughts changed in terms of who you think is looking strong for this season?
Yeah.
Now that you've
I mean, I
seen,
can't remember who I said I thought was going to win it last week. I probably said Lewis. Imagine that is. But I think I've changed my mind and gone with Max now because Max just looks so strong. And the way that he adapts to each car every year, yeah, he just seems to get the most out of everything. So he's going to throw himself at
yeah.
this again, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he is. He just seems to be unflappable at the minute. I think I was interested, with the comments that he came out at the end of last year in terms of, he was saying that now that he's won the championship, everything else is just a bonus.
Mm.
It could have really gone in two directions with that. He could have either kind of sat back and just enjoyed driving an F1, but not particularly had the drive, or he could use that in a sense of there's no pressure now. He's won his championship, and that kind of propels
Just
him to
chill
the next
out.
level.
I think it will.
Yeah, I think he seems to be on the ball. I mean, that car is solely developed around Verstappen and his way of driving and how he wants it to be set up. I can't imagine Sergio Perez has got much input in terms of the
No,
direction of that car whatsoever.
no.
Um,
But that's the thing.
and
If the Ferrari is good this year, and if that's the two top teams, I don't think Ferrari need to have a quicker car to beat Max, but I think they need to have better drivers as well because Max isn't the sort of driver that just gives up. Um, Even though he's been the slower car than the Mercedes, he always fights, and he does seem to get past them sometimes because he's just a good driver.
yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we're going to be. I'd be surprised as well. Moving forward with Mercedes, I'd be surprised if they're fighting at this stage. We were saying last week that we thought, and after the first round of testing, that Mercedes looked fairly strong, but it just doesn't seem to be the case now. Again, it's a shame for George Russell. But
We might
I'm
be
sticking
completely
with.
wrong. We could be completely wrong.
We could be, a lot can change in a week in Formula One. They're constantly developing these cars, and so I'm going to stick with Carlos Sainz for the World Championship. I still think that is a possibility.
Okay, it's good that you're sticking with it. You said that for the
Yeah, we
last
need
3 weeks. So
we said actually last week we're going to put a bet on this. I think we need to come
is
out
the
and
bet is
put
that
an
now?
actual
Should we
bet
do
on.
it now?
Yeah, let's put the bet on now.
Fuck. Shit. I'm going Max.
You going Max?
You're gonna have to.
I mean it's a good shout. It is a good shout with the way that Red Bull's been going this week. I just think Ferrari have got it.
You're gonna go
I
Science.
do. I'm going to go Sainz.
You may as well. You've
it's
stuck
got
to it for 3 weeks now. You may as well just stick with Science. I'd love to say Lewis, but that car looks like it's gonna really torture them this year.
Yeah, I do wonder if they can get on top of it. I mean, it has to happen at some point, surely, doesn't it? I mean,
It has to.
there
Yeah,
has to come a point where they get it wrong.
This is the 7-time world champion. You can't bet against him.
No, but I mean, more from the team perspective. I mean, James Allison has got it right since 2014, since the new engine regs came in. They've pretty much nailed it every single year since then. Obviously, they weren't blisteringly quick to begin with, but they were up there. They were third or fourth in the championship, and there's not been a year since where they've not made a wrong turn in the development of their cars.
Yeah, they're going to be working so hard to fix it as well. So, yeah.
I mean, Murphy's Law would dictate that they have to get something wrong at some point. There's no way a team can continue on like that without making a mistake somewhere down the lane. Yeah, exactly.
This could be it.
This could be it. I mean, Ferrari, you'd think would have poured so much resources and time into that car that. It's got to. I just don't want to see Red Bull dominate. That's all. I mean,
no, I don't want to see them dominate, but I can still see Max being the top driver.
Yeah, it was nice to have them last year in the fight because it's been a long time coming. But I don't want to see it just been a case of we've had Lewis Hamilton fight for the last, win it outright for the last 7 years, and now Verstappen's going to win it for the next 7 years. That's not what we want. It would be great if it was, Ferrari this year, McLaren next year, somebody else a year after. Maybe George.
Yeah,
well, that's
George
it.
Win one. We're going to find out. Next week's going to be really incredible. I think this will be a great race because we just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brad's actually coming over for the race next week. So we'll be doing a podcast together rather than being 1,000 miles apart.
How incredible.
Probably not that far, is it?
No, it's definitely not 1,000 miles.
It's 300 miles.
300 miles. It's not too far. I could
over
swim
a bit
there.
Of water.
Yeah.
You could swim, yeah. So Brad's coming over. So I think next week what we're going to do is we'll fully dissect the race weekend. Any updates that have come from the teams we'll be discussing. Obviously, I mean, do we even do a separate podcast after qualifying and a separate podcast after the race? Could do so.
We could film them as intermission, so we can do one each day. Do a little bit of a segment each day. And then put them all together and see how our opinions change over the weekend.
Yeah. So we'll be dissecting it in lots of detail, giving our opinions. Obviously, you'll start to hear a lot more biased opinions after the race has been on. If there's any instances like there was last year, it's going to be some heated topics of discussion, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was going to do my 5-minute segment on Formula 2, but I haven't really got any updates on it. I've not really had too much focus on what they're doing in testing or anything, so I'll wait for the races.
I mean, how much testing do they do in Formula 2? Because it's a spec series, isn't it?
Yeah, but they still do more private than anything.
Yeah, I suppose they're doing setup changes.
There's so much sim. They're on the sim every day of their lives.
Are they?
Yeah, it's been a lot of content.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have the 5-minute Formula 2 segment hopefully from Brad next week. Well, it might be next week, might be the week after. We'll see. But we'll have plenty to talk about.
Next week,
I think it's been an interesting week this week. We've seen, like we said, some teams where they should be, some teams where they shouldn't be. I think main points are for McLaren to sort out the brake issues, Mercedes to come out with a completely different concept again.
Yeah,
has to contain or remain near the top of the timing sheets, and Williams to sort themselves out, as well as Aston Martin. We didn't even mention Aston Martin, but I think they were fairly quiet this week. They just don't seem to have a quick car.
Yeah, nothing to say about Aston, to be honest. It was a very
which could be the end of Sebastian Vettel. Maybe, but remains to be seen. Anyway, we will see you next week.
Yeah,
with more information.
Can't wait.
Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.